Gone with the Wind tells the story of love, war, and loss, set against the backdrop of the American Civil War, becoming a legend of world cinema. But beyond the screen, the faces that brought this masterpiece to life were forced to confront cruel tragedies, broken marriages, fading careers, and shocking deaths. How did they leave this world, and what truths lie behind their stories? Let's find out together. Vivien Leigh as Scarlett O'Hara. Vivien Leigh, born Vivien Mary Hartley on November 5, 1913, in Darjeeling, British India. She was only 26 years old when she transformed into Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, 1939. The role earned her an Oscar and turned her into an immortal icon of Hollywood. Her fragile yet fiery beauty captivated the public, but it was also the role of Scarlett that placed immense psychological pressure on her, marking the beginning of a life filled with tragedy. Vivien Leigh's personal life was full of fractures. She first married Herbert Lee Holman, but the marriage quickly collapsed when Vivien pursued an acting career. Her second relationship with Laurence Olivier was seen as destiny, yet in reality, it was overshadowed by darkness. They were both co-stars and lovers, living under stage lights as well as the scrutiny of the public eye. Olivier's career soared, while Vivien gradually came to be seen as merely her husband's shadow. Jealousy, professional rivalry, and rumors of infidelity drove her into despair. She once admitted, "I would rather have lived a short life with Larry than endure a long one without him." Yet in reality, that love ended in a bitter divorce in 1960, leaving her deeply wounded and with a haunting sense of abandonment. At the same time, Vivien had to battle two relentless illnesses. Bipolar disorder plunged her into cycles of depression and manic episodes, leading to uncontrolled behavior and violent outbursts, even on stage. The electroshock treatments used at the time were brutal and terrifying, leaving her mentally exhausted. Alongside this, tuberculosis tormented her since the 1940s, with each relapse forcing her to withdraw from the stage. On July 8, 1967, Vivien Leigh took her last breath in London at the age of 53, after a resurgence of tuberculosis caused her to suffocate in her own apartment. She was cremated at Golders Green, and her ashes were scattered on the lake at her home in Tickeridge Mill. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at around $1 million, a testament to a legend who lived and departed in both glory and pain. Clark Gable as Rhett Butler. Clark Gable was born on February 1, 1901, in Cadiz, Ohio, USA. When he was 38 years old, he took on the role of Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, 1939. With his arrogant charm and the immortal line, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn," he became the ultimate symbol of masculinity in classic Hollywood. This role not only elevated Gable to the pinnacle of his career, but also forever tied his name to the title, the King of Hollywood. But behind the glamour were painful tragedies in love. Gable married 5 times, yet it was his third marriage to actress Carole Lombard that was his one true love. They were considered Hollywood's golden couple, until tragedy struck. In 1942, Lombard died in a plane crash while on a mission to sell war bonds. Her death shattered Gable's heart. He personally went to the crash site to retrieve her remains and spent the rest of his life in grief that never healed. Though he remarried later, close friends said, he was never the same again. Sorrow, combined with a harsh lifestyle, took a heavy toll on his health. Gable was addicted to black coffee, used diet pills, and maintained an exhausting work schedule. In his final years, while filming The Misfits under the scorching Nevada desert sun, he pushed himself through dangerous stunts that severely damaged his heart. Just 2 days after completing the movie, Gable suffered a massive heart attack, a direct result of years of neglecting his health for the sake of art. On November 16, 1960, Clark Gable died at the age of 59 after a second heart attack in Los Angeles. He was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, right beside Carole Lombard. At the time of his death, His net worth was estimated at around $10 million US, earned from film salaries and real estate. Leslie Howard as Ashley Wilkes. Leslie Howard was born on April 3, 1893, in Upper Norwood, London, England. At 46 years old, he portrayed Ashley Wilkes in Gone with the Wind, 1939, a character embodying the romantic yet uncertain ideals of the Old South, leaving a lasting impression on audiences. With his intellectual appearance and calm voice, Howard turned Ashley into a symbol of fragility caught between love and duty. Yet in real life, Howard was entangled in stormy relationships. He married Ruth Martin in 1916 and had 2 children, but his private life was torn apart by numerous affairs with actresses such as Tallulah Bankhead and Merle Oberon. The most painful of all was his relationship with Violet Cunnington, his personal secretary and companion during his brightest years in Hollywood. In 1942, Violet died of pneumonia in her early 30s, just 6 months before Howard himself perished. The loss left him with a wound that never healed. Amid the war, Howard returned to England and threw himself into anti-fascist propaganda. He wrote scripts, produced films, and starred in Pimpernel Smith, 1941, turning art into a weapon against Hitler. However, he also carried destructive habits. Heavy smoking weakened his health. Added to that were constant tensions and suspicions that he was working as a secret agent for Britain, making him a dangerous target in the eyes of Nazi Germany. On June 1, 1943, while flying from Lisbon back to England on the civilian BOAC Flight 777, the DC-3 carrying Howard was shot down by German aircraft over the Bay of Biscay. He was killed at the age of 50, and his body was never recovered. His sudden death shocked the world, with many theories suggesting Germany specifically targeted him for his propaganda role. At the time of his death, Howard left behind an estate valued at around $500,000 US from films and real estate in England. George Reeves as Brent Tarleton. George Reeves was born on January 5, 1914, in Woolstock, Iowa, USA. When he was just 25 years old, he appeared in Gone with the Wind, 1939, as Brent Tarleton, one of the 2 young men infatuated with Scarlett O'Hara, helping set the romantic tone at the beginning of the story. Reeves drew attention with his striking looks and strong physique. Afterward, Reeves entered Hollywood with great hopes, but soon became trapped by the role of Superman in the 1950s television series. Although the show brought him fame, he felt locked in as the superhero and struggled to find new roles. His private life was turbulent. Reeves drank heavily, spent recklessly on parties and gambling, and constantly faced financial instability. His relationships added more tension, first with Toni Mannix, the wife of an MGM executive, and later with a much younger actress, creating further strain in his personal life. The ultimate tragedy came on the night of June 16, 1959. Reeves was found dead in his Los Angeles home with a gunshot wound to the head and a revolver by his side. Police ruled it a suicide, but a series of suspicious details turned his death into one of Hollywood's greatest mysteries. His fiancée, Leonore Lemon, had joked, "He's going to shoot himself now," just before the gunshot was heard, and crime scene evidence, such as the gun lacking fingerprints and the number of shots not matching accounts, fueled speculation that someone else may have been involved. George Reeves died at the age of 45, leaving behind grief and conspiracy theories that have never been resolved. He was buried at Mountain View Cemetery in California and was later honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at about $200,000 US, mostly from television salaries but drained by his extravagant lifestyle. His story later inspired the film Hollywoodland, 2006, cementing his death as one of Hollywood's enduring unsolved mysteries. Ona Munson as Belle Watling. Ona Munson was born on June 16, 1906, in Sacramento, California, USA. When she played Belle Watling in Gone with the Wind, 1939, a complex woman, both alluring and compassionate, who represented moral conflict during the Civil War, she was 33 years old. Her character became an emblem of feminine independence, portraying those judged harshly by society but still holding on to kindness. Following that performance, Munson continued her career with a few notable roles, but her private life was filled with strain. She married twice, both marriages ending in failure, and was widely believed to have used them as a cover in an era when her true sexuality could not be openly acknowledged. Rumors tied her to the so-called Hollywood Sewing Circle, a secret network for LGBTQ+ artists, which only deepened her isolation and anxiety. Apart from her memorable role in the Shanghai Gesture, her film career after Gone with the Wind never regained the same brilliance, leaving her increasingly trapped in mental and emotional despair. The mounting pressures gradually eroded Munson's health and spirit. She often fell into deep depression, unable to find balance in either her personal or professional life. The red curtains of Broadway and the bright lights of Hollywood no longer concealed the loneliness she carried. On February 11, 1955, Ona Munson was found dead in her New York apartment from a barbiturate overdose. Beside her lay a heartbreaking suicide note that read, "This is the only way I can be free again. Don't follow me." She was 49 years old and was laid to rest at Ferncliff Cemetery in Hartsdale, New York. At the time of her death, her net worth was around $150,000, enough to mark a life that was both dazzling and tragic, brief yet unforgettable. Butterfly McQueen as Prissy. Butterfly McQueen was born on January 7, 1911, in Tampa, Florida, USA. At 28 years old, she portrayed Prissy in Gone with the Wind, 1939, the timid yet cheeky maid who added moments of both humor and tension to the story. The role made her a face audiences would never forget, but it also tied her permanently to a stereotyped image of African Americans. After that success, McQueen endured deep frustrations as Hollywood restricted her to servant roles. She became conflicted with her own career, rejecting many scripts that repeated the same image of slaves and maids, which she considered insulting. This determination preserved her dignity but cost her many opportunities in an industry dominated by racial prejudice. In her personal life, McQueen never married or had children, and loneliness cast a long shadow after the stage lights faded. Despite hardships, McQueen sought ways to enrich her mind. She studied politics and culture, and at 64 years old, she earned a bachelor's degree from Brooklyn College, an achievement that clearly reflected her desire to prove herself. Yet this independence also meant a life of frugality. She lived simply, avoided luxury, and often relied on a kerosene stove for heating to save money. What seemed like harmless habits eventually led to tragedy. On December 22, 1995, in her small home in Augusta, Georgia, her kerosene stove exploded. Flames engulfed her, leaving burns over 70% of her body. Though she was rushed to the hospital, McQueen did not survive, succumbing to infection and respiratory failure at the age of 84. She donated her body to medical science and left behind a net worth of only about $100,000, mostly from Social Security. Hattie McDaniel as Mammy. Hattie McDaniel was born on June 10, 1893, in Wichita, Kansas, USA. When she was 46 years old, she played Mammy in Gone with the Wind, 1939, the strong and devoted housekeeper of the O'Hara family. The role not only earned her an Academy Award, the first time a black actor had ever been honored, but also turned her into one of Hollywood's most controversial symbols. Behind the stage, her marriages were filled with grief and tension. Her first husband died young, leaving her widowed. Her second was shot dead in a conflict, while her third left her out of jealousy over her fame. She once hoped to have children, even preparing baby clothes, only to be devastated by a diagnosis of a false pregnancy. These losses pushed McDaniel into depression, leaving her lonely and searching for comfort in music and card games with friends, an escape from the emptiness marriage had left behind. That private pain was compounded by public prejudice. When she stepped on stage to receive her Oscar, McDaniel wore a proud smile, but afterward, she was still barred from attending the film's premiere in Atlanta. Even within the black community, she faced criticism for often playing maids, accused of perpetuating stereotypes. Caught in crossfire, she chose to continue her profession, famously declaring, "I'd rather play a maid on screen than be one in real life." The statement was both bitter and honest, reflecting the reality she could not escape. After years of endurance, McDaniel succumbed to breast cancer, worsened by diabetes and heart disease. She died on October 26, 1952, at the age of 59, in a California hospital. Her final wish was to be buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, but this was denied because of her race, forcing her to rest instead at Rosedale Cemetery. It was not until 1999 that a memorial was finally erected for her at Hollywood Forever to honor her legacy. At the time of her death, McDaniel left behind an estate valued at around $300,000, though much of it was consumed by taxes and medical expenses. Ward Bond as Renegade. Ward Bond was born on April 9, 1903 in Denver, Colorado, USA. At 36 years old, he appeared in Gone with the Wind, 1939, as Renegade, a small role in the war scenes, but his presence helped intensify the chaotic atmosphere of wartime. Bond quickly became a familiar face in Hollywood, his burly build and gravelly voice leaving a lasting impression on audiences. Yet in real life, his marriages were far from smooth. His first marriage to Doris Sellers Childs ended after 8 years, leaving scars on his spirit. His second wife, Mary Louise May, stayed with him until his death, but constant quarrels fueled by his hot temper, heavy drinking, and extreme conservatism kept the household tense. Bond was known in Hollywood as brutally blunt, often driving colleagues away. His rough edges meant that while friends like John Wayne stood fiercely loyal, others found him intolerable. During the 1950s, as his television career soared with the hit series Wagon Train, Bond still indulged in alcohol and cigarettes. He was often drunk at parties and passionately involved in political disputes, actively participating in Hollywood's witch hunt era. The pressures of work, combined with his reckless lifestyle, rapidly destroyed his health. On the set of The Alamo in 1960, he frequently complained of exhaustion but stubbornly kept filming, refusing to rest. On November 5, 1960, Ward Bond died suddenly at the age of 57 from a massive heart attack in Dallas, Texas, while on a work trip. His unexpected passing deeply grieved his close friends John Wayne and director John Ford, who considered it a great loss for the Western film community. At his death, Bond left behind a net worth of about $400,000, accumulated from over 200 films, and his successful television work. Laura Hope Cruz as Aunt Pitty Pat Hamilton. Laura Hope Cruz was born on December 28, 1879, in San Francisco, California, USA. When she was 60 years old, she appeared in Gone with the Wind, 1939, as Aunt Pitty Pat Hamilton, the humorous, overly anxious aunt who provided light-hearted moments amidst the tragedy of war. With her trembling voice and refined manner, Cruz made Pitty Pat a charming highlight of the film. Though she shone on both Broadway and in Hollywood, Cruz's private life was marked by disappointments. She experienced several romances but never found lasting marriage, and the economic pressures of the Great Depression repeatedly drove her into emotional collapse. On top of that, she was a heavy smoker, a habit that quickly weakened her heart. After gaining new fame from Gone with the Wind, she devoted herself to the play Blithe Spirit, but ongoing fatigue and illness caused her to faint repeatedly during rehearsals. Her final months were the most painful, as kidney disease and heart failure rapidly eroded her health. Cruz still tried to maintain a noble facade, receiving guests with afternoon tea and novels, but close friends knew the loneliness and helplessness she hid behind her elegance. The glow of the stage could not mask the long nights she spent battling illness alone. On November 13, 1942, Laura Hope Cruz passed away in New York at the age of 63. She was laid to rest at Cypress Lawn Memorial Park in California, closing the chapter on the life of a stage star who once captivated Broadway. At her death, her estate was valued at only about $50,000, a modest sum compared to her long and accomplished career. Thomas Mitchell as Gerald O'Hara. Thomas Mitchell was born on July 11, 1892, in Elizabeth, New Jersey, USA. At the age of 47, he played Gerald O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, the humorous yet tragic Irish father who left a lasting impression on audiences. The role was part of Mitchell's golden year, as he also won an Academy Award for Stagecoach that same year. Yet behind Gerald's hearty laughter was a real life full of turmoil. Mitchell went through 4 marriages, some ending in bitter divorces that left deep rifts between him and his children. Known as a great storyteller who enjoyed entertaining friends over cigars, he often turned to alcohol to ease his loneliness. Over time, this habit eroded his health, leaving his body frail and his moods increasingly unstable in his later years. Even as his career continued to shine with roles like It's a Wonderful Life, 1946, and numerous acclaimed stage performances, Mitchell faced the relentless pain of bone cancer. For years, he fought against agony but never abandoned the stage, treating acting as his lifeline. Friends recalled that he would often hide painkillers in his vest pocket just to stay upright before an audience. On December 19, 1962, Thomas Mitchell died in Beverly Hills at the age of 70. He was cremated at Chapel of the Pines, with his ashes placed in a private mausoleum according to his wishes. At the time of his passing, his net worth was about $200,000, reflecting a lifetime of steady artistic work. Mitchell is remembered not only as Gerald O'Hara from Gone with the Wind, but also as one of classic Hollywood's rare multi-talented figures. Jane Darwell as Mrs. Merriweather. Jane Darwell was born on October 15, 1879, in Palmyra, Missouri, USA. When she was 60 years old, she appeared in Gone with the Wind, 1939, as Mrs. Merriweather, the conservative Atlanta woman who helped illustrate Southern society. She left a mark with her stern presence, softened by subtle touches of humor. Off-screen, Darwell faced her own share of struggles. She married Harold Guy Cooley in 1924, but the marriage lasted only 3 years, leaving behind a void she never filled. From then on, she lived quietly, pouring herself into her work and finding joy in tending to her small garden. Away from Hollywood lights, she was a solitary woman, often avoiding any talk of her private life. Darwell's film career spanned over 200 movies, with its peak being her Academy Award win for The Grapes of Wrath, 1940. But as the years passed, her health declined. Repeated strokes and heart disease forced her into retirement, though Walt Disney personally convinced her to make a brief return in Mary Poppins, 1964. In her final years, she lived at the Motion Picture and Television Country House, a retirement home for aging entertainers, where she grew increasingly reclusive and cut off from the outside world. On August 13, 1967, Jane Darwell died at the age of 87 from a heart attack brought on by stroke complications. She was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. At her death, her estate was valued at about $150,000, over $1 million in today's money, much of it tied to her immense artistic legacy. Though she lived alone, Darwell is remembered as the quintessential mother figure of American cinema, embodying women who were both tough and compassionate. Barbara O'Neill as Ellen O'Hara. Barbara O'Neill was born on July 17, 1910, in St. Louis, Missouri, USA. At 29 years old, she played Ellen O'Hara, the elegant and compassionate mother of Scarlett in Gone with the Wind, 1939. Her graceful beauty and deeply sorrowful eyes perfectly embodied the spirit of the character. But O'Neill's life held more sorrow than glory. Born into a distinguished family, she entered the arts early, but lived under the constant pressure of her intellectual lineage. Her short-lived marriage to director Joshua Logan ended in less than 2 years, leaving her emotionally scarred. She poured her energy into stage and screen, but with fewer and fewer roles, her career never reached its full potential. O'Neill was a quiet woman who loved to read, but she turned to cigarettes as a way to soothe her loneliness. This habit eventually led to lung cancer. Though she earned an Academy Award nomination for all this, and Heaven too, 1940, she could not escape the feeling of being forgotten by Hollywood. In her final years, she withdrew to Cos Cob, Connecticut, living quietly in a small house, far from the spotlight. On September 3, 1980, Barbara O'Neill died at the age of 70 from a heart attack, the result of years of lung disease. At the time of her death, her net worth was only about $100,000, equivalent to nearly $400,000 today, reflecting a career that was short but sincere. Though she left quietly, O'Neill remains in audiences' memories as the gentle Ellen O'Hara, a brief but powerful presence in cinema history. Evelyn Keyes as Sue Ellen O'Hara. Evelyn Keyes was born on November 20, 1916 in Port Arthur, Texas, USA. When she was 23 years old, she appeared in Gone with the Wind, 1939, as Sue Ellen O'Hara, Scarlett's selfish and stubborn younger sister, a role that highlighted the complex dynamics of the Tara family. Keyes caught audiences' attention with her youthful beauty and proud demeanor. Behind her promising career, however, was a personal life full of turmoil. Her first marriage to Barton Bainbridge ended in tragedy when he shot himself in his car, leaving a suicide note that blamed her. This traumatic loss haunted Keyes and pushed her into a series of unstable relationships. Her later marriages, to director Charles Vidor, the eccentric genius John Huston, and bandleader Artie Shaw, each ended in divorce, leaving her embittered. In her memoirs, she admitted to being haunted by a fear of loss and often throwing herself into short-lived affairs with stars such as Kirk Douglas and David Niven. Her health and spirit were also damaged by trauma. She revealed that she had been abused by Huston's adopted son, Pablo, while living with the director, a devastating event that left her depressed and fractured her family life. On set, she also endured the pressures of sexual harassment, which at times stalled her career. Despite appearing in dozens of films, Keyes felt forever tied to the image of Scarlett's little sister, unable to break free from the shadow of Gone with the Wind. On July 18, 2008, Evelyn Keyes died at the age of 91 from heart complications after years of battling uterine cancer. Her ashes were divided, part sent to Lamar University in Texas, and the rest buried in her family cemetery in Georgia. At her death, her net worth was about $500,000, reflecting a lifetime of dedication to art overshadowed by the darkness of personal tragedy. Anne Rutherford as Corinne O'Hara. Anne Rutherford was born on November 2, 1917, in Vancouver, Canada. At 22 years old, she played Corinne O'Hara, the most innocent and gentle of the O'Hara sisters, providing a soft contrast to Scarlett's fiery temperament. This was also one of the roles that helped Rutherford establish the wholesome image she pursued during her years at MGM. However, Rutherford's personal life was not without turbulence. Her first marriage to David May II, the grandson of the founder of the May Company department store chain, ended after more than a decade, leaving her with one daughter but also deep emotional scars. She later married William Dozier, the famed producer behind the Batman television series, 1966 to 1968. That marriage was happier, though not free from strain, especially as Dozier's health declined before his death in 1991. Rutherford continued her acting career, appearing in many of the Andy Hardy films, as well as major works such as Pride and Prejudice, 1940, and Orchestra Wives, 1942. She was considered one of MGM's sweethearts, but as Hollywood shifted in the 1950s, she gradually stepped away from the screen, choosing a quieter life in Beverly Hills. Still, she remained devoted to her fans, often attending Gone with the Wind reunion events and fan gatherings. On June 11, 2012, Anne Rutherford died at her Beverly Hills home from heart disease at the age of 94, making her one of the longest-lived members of the film's main cast. She was cremated, and her ashes were entrusted to her daughter. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at about $1 million, largely from her film career and real estate. The stories behind Gone with the Wind show that the glamour was only a small part of their lives. Which of these tragedies struck you the most? Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next stories.